Gundam.tk presents Legend Gundam. Hey again everybody, it's Robert184, GundamReviews.net, and as Providence goes and takes a nap there, you've already seen the unbox and all the parts from this 1/100th Legend Gundam. Now it's time to turn those into something that's going to look a lot more threatening to Kira. Without his 47 weapons on, the Legend is going to look pretty dull from the background, although again I appreciate those color applications that they've got. But from the front I'd say he's looking pretty sharp. The legs are a little bit oversized it looks like compared to the shoulders, but remember he's about to get a lot bigger up there. And again, those little details like the blue here, the waist section, and that white on the head and neck is certainly helping. But like any of the big boys from Seed, he's not meant to be without his backpack, and you can see that this is going to attach on quite nicely there and fit in the middle, and then there's two pegs on the top that should add some extra stability. And you can tell that that is certainly going to help bring the Legend to life. Overall, I gotta say, it's really good in terms of proportions, even more so than the Providence, I'd say, just because it's split out there and not just the one single pie. It's actually looking pretty good. From the back, I think it looks great. I was worried about it being overlined perhaps, but no issues like that whatsoever. You can see that it's sitting at a slightly awkward angle. I'll wonder if you can fix that up afterwards. But in terms of the front view, the shoulders are not overly large. They don't take away from it. And I'd really rather have these large ones up at the top and the small ones off to the side. So this one, I think, has more visual appeal than Providence. We'll keep the backpack on here to check the articulation, but you can see that with the front skirts being independent, you can bring the leg forward for a kick and off to the side. These ones are going to move up out of the way quite well, except because it's on that solid old hip joint, it can't really do too much. But you are going to get a good bend there with the leg, and these ankles are fantastic the way they move around, and so far have seemed fairly stable, if not great for the flat foot test. Where they can go that far apart, but they're going to go up a little bit earlier than that, but they still come across as being surprisingly stable for something with that much weight on its back. For truly flat, it's closer to that. Front to back though, it is pretty impressive that you can see that the feet are flat even that far spread apart. For the upper body, there's going to be nothing doing for the waist except for the fact that it can rotate around. I suppose it could go all the way. For the shoulders, you can bring them up here. You can see that that blue part raises up, which is great, and it comes forward and back as well. You can rotate this around if you want to get things out of the way of the funnels. The shoulders are going to go up and down. They rotate here. Great bend there, almost 135. For the elbow, the head is just going to move around on the solid polycap, but outside of that, it's really just going to be the backpack that's the issue for mobility. Something I've been noticing more and more with the feet here, though, is that they've got this part, and if you line it up so that the gray part goes in there, you're going to get a lot more flexibility side to side. If you have this positioned anywhere else, you can see that it's going to get locked, not in the right place. Depending on how you want to line up the body here with the backpack, it doesn't have 2 points of articulation up there. So you've got to either let it, if you want to have it go straight up and down, you can do something like this, or you can bend it in, which is going to have it angled out up at the top, although you could play with the funnels and sort of offset that down below. For height comparison, let's kick things off next to the Zolidia, also a 1/100th non-grade, except this one's from all the way back in 1993. Much more apropos is going to be the gold frame Amatsu here, which is actually next in the Seed Destiny line, even though I sort of wish this was from just regular Astray as opposed to the later Astrays. But I digress there. Here you can see that this one's going to be a lot wider, perhaps. Overall, it looks like the funnels are just a little bit skinny. But with those ones sticking out on the back of the backpack, you can see that the Legend, even though the mobile suit comes across as being just a little bit smaller, that he still stacks up well overall. This is the one, though, that I've been waiting for, and I'd imagine you might as well. The Providence just comes across as being a lot bigger and bulkier overall, and you can see that in pretty much every part. The legs are fatter, here they're just rounder, whereas here they're a little bit sleeker if you took off that little beam saber attachment part. You've got a bigger waist section here, you've got two things down there hanging off the hips, way bigger shoulders on the Providence to go along with a big bulkier body, and a rounder, fatter head. From the back you can see that they're mostly all gray with the extra blue app up there, but otherwise you're going to have blue down there and gray for thrusters, but outside of that it's just details in lining and the way they're actually designed with the small ones on the side of the Legend as opposed to the three big ones shooting off in cardinal directions there. Overall though, I'm sort of stymied if I had to call which one of these two I like better. They both have different things going for them. Legend is certainly cleaner and more modern looking, but there's a few things I still prefer about Providence. It just looks big and bulky, and it's just those big shoulders make a big difference, and I like the yellow, of course. That's going to be more traditional Gundam, but at least Legend, even though it's not going to be as colorful because it's lacking the yellow, at least is going to have the pluses of those little tiny color applications, and the white for the V-fin and neck. In terms of posing, I never really expected the Legend to be a monster, but he's doing a better job than some other kits that I can name. Anyway, the large high-energy beam rifle is looking good. It's going to fit in very, very well. You just have to separate the hands. They are solid. You're not going to get any pegs inside or anything, or trigger finger, three-finger split. But anyway, he's looking good overall. The legs are staying in place, despite the fact that you'd think that he'd have some weight issues. And overall, he can look down the barrel and intimidate everybody, and that's without using his trademark weapon there on the back. I think Providence would be more of a melee kind of guy, but it's still cool to see him with the two beam sabers in hand. Again, you can hit the arms in almost any position, and those legs are working well despite that backpack there. I'm having no weight issues whatsoever. And you can see that the high energy beam rifle is just going to plug in there on the back, and it's going to stick up there and just add a little bit more visual oomph, as if he didn't have enough weapons on his back already. Still with a big gun strapped to his back there, I've added the clear blue beam shield, which I'm thinking is looking very good. I really like the fact that it just makes the white pop even more than it is on the forearms. And it's great that they're going to give you the bonus for the beam javelin, that you can either have this one, which is always together. If you go like that, you're going to break it apart. And the two separate ones that you can choose to attach together, which I've done here. They're going to stay in place. You can actually slide it up and down, no peg issues, or keeping it in the hand right the way you want it. And those legs are holding up. I'm overall pretty impressed with this guy, even with just his ground poses. I think I'd better film this before he goes toppling backwards, but I was just mucking around trying to see what the backpack can do. And this is with the large higher energy beam rifle still put on, which is actually going to bring a little bit of balance to the front, although it's still going to add a lot to the back. And you can see that I'm quite impressed that this guy hasn't gone toppling backwards. He looks like something more out of high-grade Universal Century, that dude with the big blue head. What is it, the Ewak Zack or whatever? And how cool is that it does not appear to be a fluke, because this is with this removed and the weapons turned up there. You can see, well, maybe he's shaking a little bit, but overall, I'm incredibly impressed. I went to no extra effort to move the legs or anything. I think they're still in the same pose that they were the last video you saw, or the last clip. That's fantastic if you've got a guy that can do this, despite the fact that he's not a master grade and doesn't have any help from an action base or anything like that. Legend, that's really gone up in my books just on the fact that it can do this. And for a slight variation, this is the same idea except they're just down. One bonus with these things on the back is that you can actually, once you pull them out to open them up into position, you can actually lock them back into place. So here they're locked in place, but either way, he's been able to stand up. And this is actually sort of cool. I'd love to see this guy in Gundam Extreme Versus to see how when he moves, of course when you do your step dashes and when your boost dashes, they're all going to move differently. I wonder if they'd actually add something like this, because he does look pretty dynamic there. You can imagine him Supermaning forward and actually looking pretty cool. So with the action base at my disposal here, well, you can see that it's going to plug into the back. One issue here is that you're going to have to open up the backpack if you want to put it in, because otherwise that thing's going to get in the way. It looks okay with his head is able to come up a little bit, but he can't quite do a full Superman. Although he's not going to look all that bad, and this pose is something that I guess you may get more use out of than I would have predicted earlier. But sadly, like with any funnel or dragoon base kind of guy who's going to attack, his best pose is going to be this one, where you have to use the power of your imagination to imagine that all of those dragoons are shooting off and looking awesome, but instead without any wiring or anything like that, there's really not much else you can do besides pretend. But there is one pose where you don't have to. You can bring up the hip dragoons and just bend those forward, and actually they sort of get lost in the shuffle, and it's also not going to work all that well just because of the way the shoulders sit. The shoulders are going to fit in there awkwardly. You can position them to go around it, but this pose is really not all that impressive, and it just sort of looks like there's some gray random things that are not going to catch your eye at all. You could add the beam rifle and shield to that, but with everything launched, I suppose this is a good way to wrap things up. So far as a mobile suit, Legend has certainly impressed me. He's done lots of things right. But stay tuned for the final verdict where I'll have a list of all the good and bad things so that you can make a call whether this is something that you want to add to your bad guy shelf, good guy shelf, GPO2A successor, whatever you want. Anyway, everybody, Robert184 Gundam.tk. See you next and final part. Ray, my boy, or whatever. Look at that. I thought I'd have to help you hold that thing up, but you don't need training wheels anymore.